The narrative opens with a little girl who lived next door wishing a good morning to a man named Sasaki as he is taking out the trash. After giving her the same treatment, Sasaki takes a train to his place of employment. When one of his subordinates at work asks him to look over his settlement report, Sasaki promises to take care of the report and offers some suggestions for improvement. He claims that this necessitates the right person for the job so that he can work on other things in the interim. His junior is pleased by this, and Sasaki then hears a girl speaking regarding a cat she just bought. When he shows interest in this, the girl shows a colleague a video of a cat. After watching the video, Sasaki remarks that the cat is so cute that he wishes he could have a pet of his own. After that, Sasaki's supervisor assigns him additional work, and he notes that this is typical of his place of employment. He says the company is of average size. After assigning him additional work, Sasaki says that this is typical of his workplace. He says the company is of average size. He has been barely scraping by due to this, but he doesn't have the courage to change jobs, and facing the market is a terrifying prospect to him as he has experienced job drought. This is why having a job where he is needed and getting the sense of contributing to society is fulfilling to him. Afterwards we see Sasaki's junior inviting him for dinner after work, but Sasaki tells him that he is running low on cash this month. His junior mentions that he can treat Sasaki to dinner, and he does. Sasaki takes a rain check and he asks his junior to invite him some other time. Sasaki then heads to a convenience store after work. He buys dinner there and he loses the lottery for getting a free item. He returns to his home afterwards and the little girl from earlier welcomes him back. Sasaki then has dinner in his home while watching some cat videos, and he gets really taken in by them. The scene cuts to Sasaki at a pet store and he checks out some cats. Sasaki notices that they are priced really high and he thinks that this is the sad part of having a low salary. He thinks that he would like to have a pet dog if he had the money for it, and Sasaki then hears a bird chirping, and its chirp sounds like the words, "Pick me." Sasaki follows the voice, and he notices a Java sparrow. He thinks that it's cute and it's only priced 3,000 yen. Sasaki buys it and he takes it home. He puts the sparrow in its cage and he puts it in his pocket. Sasaki thinks that it's really cute. Sasaki thinks that he was lonely with his 40th birthday soon approaching, and this is why he went to the pet shop. Afterwards Sasaki wonders what he should name the sparrow, and the sparrow mentions that his name is Pier Carlo and he is an inhabitant of another world and a star sage. Sasaki thinks that this bird sure talks a lot, and he thinks that this might be normal for this species. He then wonders what he should name him, and the bird repeats itself. Sasaki thinks that this bird is a bird that can talk, and he thinks that this bird is a bird already has a splendid name, but nonetheless he decides to name it Peeps. The bird looks kind of unhappy and angry with his new name, and Sasaki thinks that it's cute even when it's angry. He can't believe that he is communicating normally with a bird, and he thinks that Yamada from the pet shop did say that he could get Peeps to sit in his hand if he manages to get him acclimated to human contact. He thinks that he was determined to make this happen, and he wonders if aside from this, Java sparrows are also good at communicating. Sasaki thinks that this bird is a bird that can talk, and he thinks that this bird is a bird that can talk. Sasaki decides to try talking to the sparrow more to make sure, and he asks him what he would like to have for dinner tonight. The sparrow states that he would like to have Kobe beef Chateaubriand, and he explains that a man named Yamada at the shop claimed that it was the best thing to eat. Sasaki can't believe that he is really having a conversation with a bird, and he thinks that Yamada was eating some fine cuts of meat. He asks Peeps if the pellets are not to his liking, and Peeps states that they are not. Sasaki mentions that he also doesn't like the lousy food, but he can't afford Chateaubriand. He explains that it's an expensive kind of meat, and he apologizes to Peeps for being poor. He asks Peeps if he would like to have some pork ribs instead, and Peeps states that Sasaki should just earn the money if he doesn't have it. Peeps mentions that he was exiled from the other world and received a new life in this form. He has thought about many things since then, and he arrived at the conclusion that he should just live his life the way he wants. Sasaki thinks that he is a bad person, and that this is true, and it's not worth wasting time trying to fit in with everyone else. Eventually they all die alone, and it's good to do everything they want to do while they are still alive. He thinks that he can understand this being a cooperative slave, and Peeps mentions that to fulfill his goals, he requires the assistance of someone from this world. He mentions that he would like for Sasaki to help him, and if he does, then accumulating riches will be an easy feat for him. Sasaki states that he would do anything for his cute little birdie, and Peeps then uses magic to finalize their contract. He bestows a portion of his power to Sasaki, and he mentions that now they are connected by a path. Peeps then asks Sasaki to open his cage, and Sasaki thinks that he doesn't know what's going on, but he might as well see this through. Sasaki opens the cage, and Peeps sits on his shoulder. This makes Sasaki happy, and Peeps mentions that he can now use his former power by channeling it through Sasaki's body. He states that Sasaki's flesh is quite frail, but it's better than this small bird. Peeps then uses a magic spell to teleport Sasaki into another world, and Sasaki is surprised to see this. Peeps explains that this is the world he used to live in before his reincarnation, and this is the provincial town of Batrium and the kingdom of hers. The scene then cuts to Sasaki at his office, and his junior wonders how Sasaki managed to get here so early. He explains that everyone is late today due to a train delay. And he wonders if Sasaki took an earlier train because he has started a morning routine. Sasaki mentions that this is not the case, and his junior then asks to talk to him alone for a moment. Sasaki agrees, and they go somewhere private. His junior asks Sasaki if he would be interested in going independent with him, and he mentions that he is thinking about a new startup. He states that he will be quitting this job the next month, and having someone experienced like Sasaki with him would be great. Herein Sasaki asks for some time to think this over. He mentions that recently he has gotten busy with his personal life, and his junior wonders if he is starting something new. Sasaki states that he just adopted a pet, and his junior finds this hard to believe. Sasaki thinks that this is what he expected, but he is not lying, and ever since he visited that another world, his life has been changing and he now has a new goal. And the relief from this has made his life more refreshing. Due to this, he was able to nod to Pete's idea of doing business between the two worlds, and we then see Sasaki buying some items to sell in the other world. He thinks that he would like to trade with upper-class nobles, but it would be difficult to do that from the get-go, so they decided to start by doing business with the town's merchants first. Sasaki then buys the stuff, and he wins a chocolate bar in the lottery. He then returns to his house, and the little girl welcomes him back. Sasaki hears her stomach growling, and he gives her the chocolate bar, saying that he doesn't like chocolate and he won this for free. He then heads inside, and he goes to the other world with his wares. He goes to the Herman Trading Company, and he explains that it's a company run by the nobles that govern this town. Sasaki asks Peeps if he should head into the company with Peeps on his shoulder, and Peeps states that Sasaki can claim him as his familiar. Sasaki then sells the item he brought with him for 400 gold coins. Sasaki then sells the item he brought with him for 400 gold coins, and he states that if he converts it, then it will turn out to be 400 million yen. He mentions that the price of crafted goods is really high in this world, and Mark, the president of the company, asks him where he got these pen and paper. Sasaki mentions that he can't reveal his source, but as a compensation he promises to not sell the pen and paper to any other store. Sasaki then went back and forth between the two worlds to continue his business. And he also tried the unfamiliar local food of the other world, and Peeps also gave him lecture. He tried to learn the teleportation spell from Peeps, but the spell was too long, and he decided to take his time learning it, as he thought that he should take things slow and steady. The next day, while on a break at his office, Sasaki has some time and he decides to practice spell casting. He successfully invokes the fire spell on his first attempt after chanting it. When the fire alarm goes off, Sasaki flees the scene right away. After that, the scene cuts to Sasaki discussing this with Peeps over lunch. Following Sasaki's disclosure of the teleportation spell, Peeps tells him to head to the restaurant and remarks that Sasaki appears to have a strong affinity for magic. Sasaki believes that opening a restaurant would be a fantastic idea because they work with food a lot. After seeing a cook being let go from a restaurant, Sasaki approaches the man and asks if he would like to tell him his story. After telling Sasaki his tale, the cook revealed that his name is French. Since he was a young child, he had been an apprentice at the restaurant, and in the last few years, his culinary abilities had grown significantly. However, his boss dismissed him without considering his explanation after his co-workers falsely accused him of stealing the restaurant's money out of jealousy. He doesn't appear to be a bad guy, and if he can mimic the meal he just consumed, Sasaki believes he might be the man he's been waiting for. French is then asked by Sasaki if he would be interested in working with him to open a new store, and Sasaki says he would like French to be the store manager. This surprises him, so Sasaki talks it over with Mark before opening a restaurant. He asks Mark to procure a shop and foodstuffs for him, and together they set up an eatery right on the main road of the town. The scene cuts to Sasaki paying French his wages for the last month, and French is happy to get so much money. He mentions that he will pour his heart and soul into his work, and the scene cuts to Sasaki having lunch with Peeps. Peeps states that opening an eatery wasn't Sasaki's initial plan, and he wonders what this is for. Sasaki mentions that he thought that this would be useful for Peeps when he needed to eat, and he mentions that Chateaubriand is out of the question here, but they might be able to create something with a similar taste. He mentions that he would also like to reduce his expenditures back home by eating here, and Peeps wonders if there aren't any prospects of promotion over there. According to Sasaki, there hasn't been any increase in his pay in the previous 5 years. After that, Sasaki says he practiced magic for a few days before returning home. During that time, he learned how to use shooting magic with fire, earth, water, and ice, but he made no real progress on the teleportation spell. After that, the scene cuts to Sasaki purchasing some hunting gear and mentioning that nobles are starting to get really into hunting. Peeps states that it's comparable to golf in this world, and Sasaki thinks that Peeps has been studying a lot about this world lately. Peeps mentions that it's all because of the internet, and Sasaki then buys some binoculars and Swiss Army knife, and he presents them to Mark. Mark buys them both for a high price, and due to this he also manages to make progress on his initial plan to do business with the nobles. Afterwards he pays a visit to Viscount Muller, the noble who governs this land, and the Viscount checks the goods discreetly. Seeing this, Sasaki thinks that he can't just bring anything here, and he should be more particular about his products in the future. Muller then mentions that he has heard that Sasaki is from another continent, and he wonders if these goods are common in his continent or if they are considered products which are accessible to only a few like the nobility. Sasaki mentions that only a select few possess these goods, and Muller wonders if this means that Sasaki is a man of high status in his own right. He mentions that he does not wish to engage in one-sided dealings with someone of a status equal to a noble, and Sasaki thinks that he has to answer this carefully. He mentions that he is a craftsman and he drifted to this continent after his ship was wrecked. The goods he bought today are the ones he had with him, and the goods he bought today are newly made. Muller understands, and he mentions that from now on Sasaki is going to sell his goods to the Hermann Trading Company and bring some of them to him as well. He will purchase them with something extra, and from now on Sasaki is permitted to enter this mansion whenever he wants. He mentions that Sasaki should tell him if he notices anything particular in this town that could benefit his territory, and he could report it to him when he brings his wares. When his junior brings up the fact that Sasaki is unwilling to accompany him, Sasaki wonders why he wants him to join him so much. Sasaki exudes an aura of competence and seems to be bursting with energy lately. Sasaki speculates that he may be sleeping better now that he purchased a new bed. He believes he has been sleeping in and out of the other world lately, where there is an enormous bed. As a result, his body is gradually adjusting to a more opulent lifestyle, and the bed in his room is beginning to feel constricting. He thinks that maybe he should also start sleeping there, and after his party he heads home. On his way he dodges some ice shards that he has found, and he notices a man trying to kill a woman by using some kind of superpower. He tries to run away, but he gets concerned about the woman's well-being, and he thinks that this man might be the one from the news. He then attacks the man with an ice shard, and the man starts to freeze. Sasaki thinks that he doesn't want to kill this man, but he doesn't know how to stop this spell, and the woman then turns the ice into water and she points a gun at Sasaki. She asks Sasaki if he is a psychic and where he is from. She wonders if he is the one who fired that icicle, and Sasaki states that he did. The woman asks him when he awakened these powers, and Sasaki mentions that he did that recently. The woman can't believe that she was saved by a stray psychic, and she asks him to come with her. She mentions that she is not going to harm him, and Sasaki wonders if they are magicians like him. He thinks that it won't be surprising if there are other people from Peep's world here, and if this is the case, he would like to talk more with her. When he asks to go to his house first, the woman responds that he should get changed into some new clothes since he will be spending the night. When Sasaki brings up the fact that he has work tomorrow, the woman says the company will take care of it. After Sasaki tells Peeps everything, Peeps remarks that he doesn't sense any mana coming from that woman. He speculates that she might be utilizing a phenomenon other than magic, and believes that while there may be similar phenomena in both of their worlds, their underlying logical systems are completely different. Sasaki has nothing to argue with, which is very unfortunate. Sasaki thinks that this could be the discovery of the century, and Peeps mentions that they should listen to her to learn more about that. Sasaki asks Peeps to come along as well, and Peeps agrees. Sasaki then tries to leave, and his neighbor asks him if he is going out. Sasaki states that he is, and the girl states that it must be hard to be out so late. The girl then wonders if they can talk for a moment, and Sasaki mentions that he is in a hurry. And he wonders if it can wait till the next time. The girl agrees, and Sasaki then meets with the woman, and he states that he will also be bringing his pet sparrow with him. The woman agrees to this. And she introduces herself as Hashizaki. Sasaki also introduces himself, and Hashizaki thanks him for coming to her rescue. They then head to the organization, and on the way Hashizaki explains to Sasaki that psychics are like magicians whose powers manifest spontaneously, and the rate of manifestation is 1 every 100,000 people. Once their abilities manifest, they never change back, and the abilities vary from person to person. There hasn't been any record of anyone manifesting additional abilities, but after repeated use their abilities can grow in strength. She mentions that her ability is to manipulate water movement and temperature, and Sasaki thinks that this seems like it's separate from magic. Hashizaki states that many of these abilities are dangerous, and there are psychics who turn to crime. Those are the ones that they catch, and Sasaki wonders if this is her job. Hashizaki mentions that it is, and she states that as a general rule, once someone manifests their ability, they must be registered with the country's organization for managing psychics. Sasaki mentions that he didn't know that an organization like that existed, and Hashizaki states that it's because this is a national secret. She says that this is the Paranormal Phenomenon Countermeasure Bureau when they get to the organization building. When she tells Sasaki that this will be his office going forward, he is taken aback. They enter after Hashizaki says that she registered him some time ago. Hashizaki says Sasaki will be treated well here, treated like a government official, and will be able to make good money at work. She states that he will learn more in his training, and she asks him what he can do with his power. Sasaki thinks that the title of a government official is alluring, but he doesn't want to go to the battlefield. And he thinks that he should set the bar low so that they wouldn't want him in battle. He mentions that he can only shoot icicles, and he shows her how he forms the icicles. Seeing this, Hashizaki realizes that Sasaki can create ice from nothing, and she thinks that this would be a great match for her power. She explains that she can manipulate water's movement and temperature, but she can't create water, and due to this she has to carry water bottles with her. But with him around she would no longer have to worry about that, and he can't do anything about it. And she can go on more dangerous missions. Sasaki thinks that she must be the workaholic type, and he wonders if she is already filling him into her next mission. He states that he would like to take things safe and do stuff he is good at. And Hashizaki mentions that a psychic's paycheck has no limit and they earn more the harder they work. Sasaki thinks that he got himself caught with a dangerous person, and the scene cuts to him in a room at the bureau. He thinks that he would like to sleep for now, but he has to stock up and go to the other world. He also needs to give French his pay, and he thinks that he can't use his magic here, as this place might be under surveillance. He then takes a walk with Peeps, and Peeps tells him that they are being tailed. Sasaki mentions that he expected this, and he states that stocking up is impossible, but he would like to explain his situation to everyone there. He wonders if they can do something, and Peeps mentions that several hours in the other world will only be a few minutes here, and he tells Sasaki to go to the other world under the pretext of using the restroom. Sasaki then uses the restroom of a convenience store, and he teleports to the other world. He pays French his wages and tells Mark that he will need some time before their next deal. When the next morning's scene switches to someone ringing Sasaki's doorbell, he realizes it's 6 in the morning. When he discovers Hashizaki at the door, she says it's time for work. Sasaki says he would like to report but is hesitant to work with her. To her, and he wants to make sure that this is a real place of work. Hashizaki explains that this is the reason she dislikes working with the elderly. She also asks Sasaki to get dressed and says they can stop by the bureau en route. The section chief of Hashizaki's department then comes there, and he mentions that he got curious because Hashizaki burst out of the office in the morning. He mentions that he doesn't mind Hashizaki being enthusiastic about work, but she should not involve the new guy without permission. The section chief then changes his mind and says that he wants to continuously work, then apologizes for meeting Sasaki like this, and he mentions that he is a really busy man. He states that his name is Akutsa and he will be Sasaki's immediate superior. Akutsu then asks Hashizaki to head back to the office and write up yesterday's report. He mentions that Sasaki will be getting some training for now and he gives Sasaki a new phone. He mentions that they are going to contact Sasaki using this and he asks him to carry this on his person at all times as he might get called outside of work hours in case of an emergency. Sasaki thinks that this sucks and he thinks that he can just leave this phone in the other world if they call him too frequently. This would keep the phone out of network coverage and it would also disable the GPS tracking. Akutsu then leaves as he has other work to take care of and he mentions that Sasaki can either call or text him if he has any problems. The scene then cuts to Sasaki doing a medical exam in the building and he mentions that Sasaki can either call or text him if he has any problems. After taking an ID picture, he is taught a lot of stuff about the agency. He mentions that his new workplace is a peripheral government ministry and it does not exist outwardly. They are not allowed to speak of it to anyone outside the bureau and therefore their public position is that of police sergeants. Sasaki thinks that this explains why Hashizaki carries a gun with her and he asks one of the people training him about Hashizaki. The person wonders why he is asking and Sasaki pair up with her. The person wishes him luck and Sasaki thinks that she must be the troublesome type. Sasaki states that after this his training was over and they handed him an allowance of 1 million to cover for job preparation. Sasaki thinks that he can use this money to stock up for now and he heads back to his home. There he meets the little girl and he remembers that she wanted to talk to him. The girl then gives him some cookies that she baked at her home economics class as thanks for the chocolate and Sasaki says that he is not going to give him any cookies. Sasaki thanks her for this. The girl then asks Sasaki if the woman he was with earlier is his girlfriend and Sasaki states that she is just his superior at work. The girl mentions that she seems a little young for that and Sasaki mentions that his company values ability more than seniority. The girl wonders if it's a foreign company and Sasaki states that it's something like that and he thinks that he can't tell her the truth after knowing what happened to those who leaked confidential information. Sasaki then heads inside and says that he is not going to give lot of noise. Sasaki realizes that something is up and he takes Peeps out for a walk. Peeps then tells Sasaki that some people bugged his place while he was out. And Sasaki asks him if they saw him checking the internet. Peeps mentions that they did not and the scene cuts to Sasaki disarming the camera and microphone at his house. Akutsu then calls Sasaki and he mentions that Sasaki has some real talent. Sasaki mentions that he understands Akutsu's apprehensions but he asks him to refrain from doing something like this from now on or it will be difficult for him to act according to his wishes. Akutsu apologizes and he mentions that this was like a test. He states that Sasaki passed. And he explains that there were people who didn't think fondly of their organization. This was a test to check his skill and confirm his stance. If he viewed their organization as an enemy then he wouldn't have removed the bug from his phone. Sasaki then tells Sasaki that he has a problem with his phone. And he mentions that they have had several opportunities to catch informants and most of them either blew their cover at this stage or pretended not to notice. He mentions that there are many psychics who rush into danger and many believe that they are the chosen ones. To handle and manage these sorts of people they would like to welcome a honest and skilled person like Sasaki. He hopes that Sasaki can put his skills to good use working for him and Sasaki understands. He then hangs up the phone and he thinks that Akutsu was the kind of person around whom he can't let his guard down. Peeps then wonders if Sasaki is going to stock up tonight and Sasaki states that he will do that another time and he thinks that his relaxing life in another world is still a faraway dream. And elsewhere Akutsu thinks that Sasaki seems like the kind of person whom he can use well. The scene then cuts to Sasaki practicing magic in the other world and Peeps mentions that he didn't expect Sasaki to learn intermediate spells so soon. Sasaki states that this must be because of the magic that Peeps gave him. Sasaki then asks Sasaki if he can use the magic that he can use in this world and Peeps mentions that Sasaki's performance is impressive even independent of that. He states that most magic users in this world take more than a decade to reach intermediate magic and advancing this far in just weeks is exceptional. Sasaki then mentions that in today's session he learned recovery and lightning magic and he writes the spells for those in his smartphone. Peeps mentions that Sasaki is diligent with this and Sasaki states that he needs to keep track of all the spells he has learned but memorizing them is rather challenging. Peeps suggests that Sasaki should use a grimoire and Sasaki wonders where he can get that. Peeps tells him that Sasaki already has one in his hand, and he explains that grimoire is a generic term for a collection of transcribed chants. Since his phone has the chants written in it, it is also a grimoire. Sasaki then states that it's time for their meeting with Mark, and after that they are going to have something to eat at the restaurant. And Peeps tells him that he wants meat. The scene then cuts to Sasaki showing some walkie-talkie to Mark, and Mark thinks that they are incredible. Sasaki explains to him that these things run on fuel, and he shows him the batteries they run on. He mentions that it will stop working once the fuel in these small pieces of metal runs out, and Mark states that even with that drawback, these are still impressive. Sasaki thinks that his new imports are going over well, and he is glad that he won't get left holding inventory. Afterwards, Mark thanks Sasaki for providing such wonderful wares, and Sasaki apologizes for him waiting. Mark mentions that he doesn't mind, and he wonders if things have settled down for him. Sasaki states that they have, but he thinks that in actuality they haven't. Mark then asks Sasaki if he could buy his entire stock of walkie-talkies, and he mentions that he would make him an excellent offer. Hearing this, Sasaki wonders if something is wrong, and Mark mentions that Viscount Muller has asked him to buy Sasaki's entire stock if he brings any remarkable products. He mentions that in truth, tensions with the neighboring country have been growing, and he thinks that this is in preparation of that. He asks Sasaki to be careful, and the scene then cuts to Sasaki meeting French outside his restaurant. Sasaki notices that the restaurant business is booming, and he gives French his pay for the month. He gives him some new recipes as well, and he mentions that he would like French to replicate them. French mentions that they can go over the details inside, and Sasaki then tells French about the recipes, and he returns after some lunch. The next morning, Sasaki receives a call from Hashizaki, and Hashizaki asks him to come in for a mission. She realizes that he is still asleep, and she wonders if he didn't get a call from the chief. Sasaki notices that he has missed several of the chief's calls, and he heads to the office in a hurry. He apologizes to the chief for being late, and at the office he notices some of the other psychics, and the chief introduces Sasaki to the others. He mentions that Sasaki will be mostly working, and he will be working for him. Sasaki then asks him to come in for a working with Hashizaki, and after saying hello, the other psychics leave. Sasaki is then briefed on his mission, and the chief tells him that they will be carrying out a mass arrest. He mentions that it's a group that operates in the city, and its members are all unregistered psychics. Sasaki wonders if they are arresting them for refusing registration, and the chief mentions that it's not that, and he explains that it's because one of their members used his powers to cause harm. Sasaki notices that the man who attacked Hashizaki is a member of the group, and the chief tells him that the other members are suspected as complicit. He mentions that they have been investigating this for a while, and they just recently discovered their hideout. They need to take them into custody to prevent further harm, and the scene cuts to Sasaki heading out to the group's hideout with some other psychics. He is nervous, and Hashizaki asks him to calm down as he is not going to fight. Sasaki thinks that playing frontline support also makes him a target, and the other psychics tell Sasaki to calm down. Sasaki then asks Hashizaki if she is not afraid to fight, and Hashizaki mentions that high risk means high rewards, and we find out that she is excited for this because of the money. Hashizaki then mentions that she will be counting on Sasaki for support, and Sasaki mentions that he will do his best. The scene then cuts to them at the group's hideout, and Sasaki wishes that he had learned a barrier spell. The chief in the control room tells them to start their mission, and the psychics raid the area, and they ask everyone to surrender. They notice that no one is actually here, and they wonder what's going on. Hashizaki thinks that something feels weird to her, and the psychics on the field then hear the screams of the officers in the control room through their comms. They then lose contact with the control room, and someone uses the bowling ball and pins in the hideout to attack the psychics who are waiting. After that, Hashizaki gives her an icicle from Sasaki and turns it into water. Both she and Hashizaki utilize it to preserve their lives. She blocks balls and bowling pins that are thrown at her with the water, and Sasaki believes they're always on the defensive. When he tries to find the psychic, one of the psychics is lifted by the enemy psychic and they drop him. When Hashizaki sees him using her water, she tells Sasaki to leave. Sasaki agrees with her when she says that he will die at this rate, but if Hashizaki loses her water supply, she will have a problem. Subsequently, Sasaki informs her that he is her partner and cannot leave her. Hashizaki is happy to hear this, and Sasaki believes that leaving her would leave a psychological scar on him. He has also read that leaving someone behind is a serious offense. When one of the psychics finally comes out, she says that she didn't think they would put up such a fight. Hashizaki then turns the water from her water bottle into ice, and the girl is surprised to see that Hashizaki can also control the temperature of the water, and Hashizaki tries to attack her, but the girl dodges. Hashizaki dodges Hashizaki's subsequent attacks as well, and she knocks out Hashizaki somehow. She mentions that there is one more rat scurrying around, and she asks Sasaki to reveal himself. Sasaki believes their entire squad is dead and he doesn't even know how many enemies there are when she threatens to kill Hashizaki if he doesn't. He exposes himself because he believes that someone with such leg strength can't outrun him. He introduces himself as soon as the girl realizes that his face is unfamiliar. He seems unsettling to the girl, who questions whether he is the source of the water she was using. According to Sasaki, he is, and he finds it amazing that the girl was able to figure him out so quickly. He thinks that he needs to regain some ground, and he mentions that all of them also have some fearsome abilities. The power to send objects flying gives them control over an area. And they can even take out stragglers. He wonders if she can tell him the name of their group, and the girl is surprised that Sasaki has never heard of him. Sasaki wonders if they are famous, and the girl realizes that Sasaki is a new recruit. Sasaki can't believe that he just revealed how green he is, but this does confirm his suspicion that she is not the only one here. Sasaki then mentions that he just joined the organization the other day, and he mentions that he would like to meet her other companions if she doesn't mind. He states that he is unable to pinpoint their location, and he thinks that he would at least like to know how many there are. The girl states that he can tell him the name of their group, and he mentions that he can't. That Sasaki seems really calm despite the situation he is in, and Sasaki tells her that his ignorance is the only thing he can rely on right now. Sasaki then asks her if he can meet her companions, and the girl tells him that she can't oblige with him. Sasaki thinks that it's a shame, and he puts his comms away. He then recites a spell, and he uses lightning magic to attack the girl, but the girl dodges. She wonders what that was, and the psychokinesis user then tries to attack Sasaki with the bowling balls and pins, but Sasaki uses his lightning spell to protect himself. His spell also manages to take out 2 hidden psychics, and he thinks that this must be all of them. The girl then asks Sasaki what he is, and Sasaki mentions that he is just a newcomer to this business. He states that he would like to offer the girl a proposal, and he mentions that he will allow her to leave here in peace if she promises to not tell anybody what she saw here. He states that they should end this confrontation in a draw, and he says that he will allow her to leave here in peace if she promises to not tell anybody what he saw here. He mentions that he would prefer not to press this issue any further and risk getting hurt. The girl accepts his offer, and she wonders if Sasaki would like to join them instead. Sasaki refuses, and he mentions that he is more comfortable following the herd. The girl states that they would love to have him if he ever feels like joining, and Sasaki tells her that he will be sure to reach out if he does. The girl tries to leave, but before she does, Sasaki asks her about the fate of his superiors, and the girl tells him that since they have called off the fight, she will release them. The girl then leaves, and the scene cuts to Sasaki telling the chief that the enemy withdrew on their own accord. The chief chooses to believe his story, and he apologizes for putting Sasaki through all this on his first job. He tells Sasaki to go home and rest now, and Sasaki excuses himself. He then asks Hashizaki if she is alright, and Hashizaki mentions that she is fine. She asks Sasaki if he has some free time after this, and Sasaki states that he will be mad if he told her that he needs to go home and rest. Hashizaki mentions that she would like to express her gratitude, and the scene cuts to the 2 of them in a fancy hotel. Hashizaki thanks him for saving her, and Sasaki tells her that he was just doing his job. He states that she got hurt due to his lack of ability in the end, and he apologizes for that. Hashizaki mentions that Sasaki still saved her life back there, and they then order some food. Hashizaki orders orange juice, and Sasaki says that she will be fine. Hashizaki orders some beer, and Sasaki asks her if she doesn't like to drink. Hashizaki mentions that she can't drink, as she is underage, and Sasaki is surprised to find out that Hashizaki is only 16 years old. Hashizaki states that she dresses like this so that the others at her workplace don't look down on her, and she mentions that she also goes to school when she is not on duty. Sasaki asks her why she is so devoted to her job, and he mentions that there must be other things that she is interested in her life. Hashizaki mentions that it's because this job pays well, and the two of them then make a toast to Sasaki's first mission, and Hashizaki mentions that she would be counting on Sasaki's support from now on. The scene then cuts to Sasaki on his way back to his house, and he notices a girl picking up food from a garbage can. He wonders if he should report her to the police, but he thinks that this would take a lot of time, and right now he just wants to go home and get some rest. He then notices that the girl has disappeared, and he finds her flying above. The girl then enters some kind of portal and she leaves. The scene then cuts to Sasaki feeding Shadowbrian made from Kobe beef to Peeps. And he mentions that this is a thanks for everything that Peeps has done for him. Peeps eats the meat and Sasaki thinks that he is really cute. Sasaki then tells Peeps about his day, and Peeps thinks that his day sounds tiring. Sasaki wishes that he had learned barrier magic, and Peeps mentions that healing magic could have been useful in the future. Sasaki then tells Peeps about his day, and Peeps thinks that his day will be useful as well. Sasaki agrees with Peeps, and he asks Peeps to help him out with magic after his meeting with Mark. Peeps agrees, and Sasaki thinks that after training he will enjoy French's cooking and sleep in a fluffy bed. He thinks that this was his plan, but after talking with Viscount Muller he finds out that a war is coming. The Viscount mentions that the king has ordered him to the front lines as well, and Sasaki thinks that Mark was right. Muller states that the Ajin Empire is vast and mighty, and in terms of numbers their army is twice the size of hers. If the enemy troops manage to reach the city, then the damage will be considerable, and he wonders if he can count on Sasaki's aid. Sasaki wonders how he can turn down Muller, as he doesn't want to be involved in a war, and he mentions that he is just a humble craftsman. He mentions that he can't be of any use to Muller, and Muller states that he knows who Sasaki is, but the items that he has brought to their domain is going to be a great help in the war effort. He mentions that he can't be of any use to Muller, and Muller explains to Sasaki that the king has ordered him to build strongholds and feed the front lines. Sasaki explains that as a nobleman in service to the crown, Muller is obliged to comply, and refusal would strip him of his peerage. Muller mentions that it takes 2 weeks to reach the front lines by carriage, and gathering and transporting the necessary goods within a month is a hopeless endeavor. He states that he has been negotiating with the traders starting with the Hermann Trade Company, but given the jump in the price of foods, forcing them to comply would destroy this city's economy. Sasaki then mentions that in this situation the wisest decision would be to abandon this kingdom, and Muller asks him if he has ever heard of the Star Sage. Sasaki lies, and he says that he hasn't, and Muller explains to him that roughly a century ago, the kingdom of hers was a prosperous land thriving in magical technology, but due to exploitation at the hands of a particular group of nobles, the mages left this land. To have managed the peace in their absence was a skilled mage called the Star Sage, and he worked tirelessly on behalf of this kingdom, but even this ended a few years ago. A faction of nobles who resented the favor that the king showed the Star Sage had the great mage killed, and from then on, this kingdom has been plagued by corruption and decline. Muller mentions that the nobles brought this fate upon themselves, and this is why he can't accept Sasaki's advice. He states that he intends to give his last breath protecting the people of this land, and Sasaki apologizes. He mentions that he will do his best to meet Muller's expectations, and in exchange he asks Muller to make him a promise. The scene then cuts to Sasaki leaving Muller's estate, and a count named Dietrich then visits Muller. Afterwards Peeps asks Sasaki why he asked Muller to make such a promise, and Sasaki tells Peeps to not worry about this. He then asks Peeps how he thinks that war is going to turn out, and Peeps mentions that this kingdom is likely going to lose. He asks Sasaki why he asked Muller to make such a promise, and Sasaki tells Peeps to not worry about this. He asks Sasaki what he wishes to do, and Sasaki mentions that he would like to help if he can, but there is not much he can do. Peeps mentions that he can easily turn this around with his magic, and he states that a spat between two nations is a trivial thing before his power. He mentions that destroying is much easier than creating. And he states that the relationships that Sasaki has built in this city should not be surrendered that easily. Sasaki then states that they should think of a way to resolve things without drawing too much attention onto themselves, and then he visits his restaurant. He notices some chefs leaving the restaurant and he asks French about this. French tells him that his old master wants him to sell their ingredients to him at a reduced price, and he states that he does feel indebted to him for teaching him. But he is not going to do anything to betray Sasaki's trust. Sasaki is glad to hear this, and he asks French to tell him if something like this happens again. He mentions that he will come up with some countermeasures, as he wants to keep French and this restaurant safe. This Sasaki then thinks that the prices of foodstuffs are already skyrocketing and he will have to take action soon. The scene then cuts to Sasaki at Kepler Trading Company in the Republic of Lunge, and Peeps tells him that this is one of the top trading companies in the town of New Sonia. Sasaki goes in and he gives the company owner a list of goods that he wants. The owner thinks that this is quite a long list and he wonders if Sasaki is purchasing this due to a war. He mentions that a few days ago he heard from their southern branch that local prices on food are on the rise, and he wonders if this has to do about tensions with the neighboring land. Sasaki tells him that he is right, and he mentions that he is procuring this for a country at war. The owner mentions that it would be difficult for Sasaki to be able to transport this stuff back in time even if he sells this to him, and he would suffer a great loss if things devolve before his return. Sasaki tells him that he is sure that all of this stuff will be sold to him and he will be able to transport it back in time. The owner mentions that Sasaki seems really sure of this. He states that Sasaki doesn't seem to be from this continent, and Sasaki tells him that it would be easier for someone like him to move around under these circumstances. He states that he believes that ensuring good faith from merchants requires neither rank or reputation but the ability to make profit. The owner agrees with him and he wonders if Sasaki would be patronizing other trading houses. Sasaki mentions that he is only going to do business with the company owner, and he is sure that he is not going to be able to do business with Kepler Trading Company, and the owner asks him how he is going to pay. Sasaki tells him that he is going to pay in large gold coins from the kingdom of hers, and the owner agrees to his terms. The scene then cuts to Sasaki showing a warehouse full of foodstuffs to Muller, and Muller can't believe his eyes. He is surprised that Sasaki managed to get this much in just a few days, and he thanks him for this. He mentions that Sasaki has saved countless lives with this, and he wonders if he also has the ability to travel instantly between locations. He says that he is going to be able to travel to different locations just like the Star Sage. Sasaki thinks that Peeps was the one who transported everything, but he can't put Peeps in danger, and he asks Muller to keep this between themselves. Muller understands, and Sasaki then asks Muller the origin of the Star Sage title. Muller mentions that the Star Sage knew more spell than there are stars in the night sky, and this is what gave rise to that name. He mentions that the Star Sage was bashful when anyone called him by this name, and Sasaki thinks that Peeps sure said his title allowed for him to travel to the moon. He then asks Muller to keep the Star Sage in the dark for someone who was embarrassed about it. He thinks that Peeps must like his nickname quite a bit, and the scene cuts to Muller thanking Sasaki again. He mentions that thanks to him, he has some leeway in his travels, and he states that he was glad to speak of the Star Sage with Sasaki. He mentions that he might have been able to save the Star Sage if he had been as brave as Sasaki, and Sasaki then leaves his house by carriage. He mentions that roughly a month later he found out that Viscount Muller had perished, and the scene cuts to him talking with Akutsu. Akutsu mentions that he has decided to promote Sasaki, and he explains that the incident other day resulted in a multitude of injuries. As a result, there were several positions that needed to be filled immediately, so he elevates Sasaki to inspector. Although Akutsu hopes Sasaki can understand, he notes that Sasaki might not appreciate being promoted in this way. When Sasaki says he does, Akutsu responds by saying Sasaki will be working for the Star Sage on his next assignment. Then he clarifies that they were forming a partnership with Hashizaki in order to enlist psychics. This does not sit well with Sasaki, so Akutsu asks him if there is an issue. Sasaki tells him that he is not too comfortable working with Hashizaki, and Akutsu tells him that there are many ways to recruit psychics. Sometimes they approach wild psychics based on information from the police reports, and sometimes they negotiate with psychics who have been working as irregulars. Akutsu wonders if Sasaki would still like to go solo, and after thinking about the irregulars that he encountered earlier, Sasaki mentions that he is happy to work with Hashizaki. The scene then cuts to Sasaki returning to his apartment, and he meets the little girl again. She mentions that Sasaki seems busy lately, and Sasaki states that he is. She wonders if Sasaki would like for her to give him a shoulder massage as thanks for everything he has done for her, and Sasaki thinks that the girl has made similar offers to him before, but he can't accept. He declines her offer, and he gives her some different types of breads that he bought earlier. The girl thanks him for this, and Sasaki enters his apartment. He notices Peeps watching the new, and he turns off the TV. He tells Peeps that he has brought cake for the two of them, and he serves the cake. But Peeps doesn't say a word. Sasaki eats the cake, but Peeps doesn't even touch it, and Sasaki asks him if he was close with this Count Muller. Peeps mentions that the two of them shared drinks a few times, and he thought that Muller would like to go with him. Muller would at least live a little longer. Sasaki wonders if Peeps' world has spells that can bring people back from the dead, and Peeps mentions that it doesn't. Sasaki mentions that there is no such method in their world as well, and Peeps states that it's alright because he knows that everything that is alive must die one day. Sasaki understands his reasoning, but he still asks Peeps to let him know if he can do anything for him. And Peeps states that Sasaki really knows how to sweet-talk. The scene then cuts to Sasaki returning to the other world, and Peeps tells French how things have been since the last time. French tells him that the old master and his men haven't been back, but many people are leaving the city after hearing of the Viscount's death. Sasaki understands, and Mark then comes running to the restaurant. He informs Sasaki that Viscount Muller's butler has summoned the two of them, and the scene cuts to Muller's butler introducing Elsa, the daughter of Viscount Muller. Elsa greets them unwillingly, and the butler informs them that a succession dispute is brewing after the death of the Viscount. Elsa's elder brothers named Maximilian and Kai are vying with each other to become the next head of the household, and Elsa mentions that Kai is an idiot and their house would be done for if he takes over. The butler asks her to not speak that way in front of others, and he explains that Elsa is closer to Maximilian than she is to Kai. Mark understands, and he wonders what the butler wants him to do. The butler mentions that he would like for the Herman Trading Company to take care of Elsa until the succession dispute is over, and Mark hesitates to accept this job, but he accepts it nonetheless. He mentions that the Viscount has been very kind to him, and now it's his turn to repay his kindness. The butler tells Elsa that he will see to her brothers and the estate in her absence, and Mark mentions that he will take care of Elsa the best he can. Sasaki then wonders why he was summoned here, and the butler states that he has heard that Sasaki has tools which allow people to communicate and see across distances, and Sasaki states that he does. The butler asks if older organisms have similar powers, and the butler asks how. No person is in her ways now. Sasaki if he would be willing to sell him one of each, and Sasaki thinks that he can't see any issues with selling them to the Viscount's butler, but something feels off here. He still agrees to sell the goods to the butler, and the butler thanks him. The story continues, and the butler of House Muller talks to someone secretly using the devices he just got from Sasaki. He mentions that many of the nobles backing the two brothers are quite greedy, and the master of the house used to keep them at bay, but now that he is gone, the slightest of wind can spark a fire. He states that everything will go as planned if he can see the marriage through, and he hopes that he hasn't forgotten about his compensation. The butler thinks that he can finally retire with this, and the scene then cuts to Sasaki having lunch with Elsa. She thinks that this curry is great, and Sasaki explains that it's been a while since Elsa has started living in hiding with the Herman Trading Company. She seems to have settled in for now. And Sasaki then eats the curry, and he also thinks that this is good. He thinks that Frank is really talented as he managed to replicate the recipe he gave him. Elsa then mentions that Sasaki's familiar is quite charming, and she wonders if she can pet him. Sasaki is not sure about this, but Peeps agrees and Elsa pets him. She thinks that Peeps is just adorable, and Sasaki wishes that he could also pet Peeps. Elsa then accidentally hurts Peeps' eye while petting him, and Peeps screams at this. Elsa then wonders if this bird just talked, and Sasaki tries to feign ignorance. Elsa still insists on it, but Mark then drops by there. And he mentions that Elsa has to return to the estate at once. The scene then cuts to Elsa, Sasaki, and Mark at the estate, and the butler shows the three of them some bloody swords which were found in the forest in their backyard. Elsa notices that these swords belong to her brothers, and Sasaki asks him what happened to them. The butler mentions that they searched the entire area, but there was no trace of them, and they only saw signs of a heated battle. That he fears the worst, and the butler mentions that he can understand that Elsa must be suffering right now, but he has to ask her to assume her place as the master of the house. Sasaki mentions that this might not be the right time for this, but the butler states that Elsa is the only one with any claim to the title right now, and if she refuses then the house will be dissolved. Elsa mentions that she doesn't want this, and Butler states that she can take the title only in name, and until she is married, he will handle the affairs of the estate. Hearing this, Elsa agrees, and the scene cuts to Mark and Sasaki leaving by carriage. On the way they notice a bunch of people leaving the city, and Mark tells him that they are evacuating after hearing that the king's forces were broken at the front. He states that many citizens have begun seeking safer harbor, and he has been told that the Ogun Empire has already begun attacking the surrounding regions. He states that he was also planning to take shelter in the capital, and he asks Sasaki if he would like to join him. Sasaki thanks him for the invitation, but he means to say that he wants to take the title. Mark believes it's awful that Elsa's first task as the head of her household might be to leave the lands her family has looked after for generations, even though he says he will be alright. Later, we find Sasaki and Peeps alone together, and Peeps says he needs to ask Sasaki for a favor. Sasaki says they should try to turn the tide of war when he is unsure if he wants to. He wonders if Peeps is going to use teleportation like usual, and Peeps apologizes for asking this of Sasaki. He mentions that they don't know the current location of the enemy, so they are going to use a different way, and we then see Sasaki flying through the air. Sasaki thinks that this is amazing, and he mentions that it's always been the dream of humans to fly without technology. He asks Peeps if he can teach this spell to him, and Peeps agrees to teach him this the next time. They then arrive at the camp of the Ogun army, and Peeps states that he is going to blow them away in a single blast to not make them suffer. He then uses a powerful spell to wipe out the entire camp in seconds, and Peeps states that the area of effect of this spell can also be focused on a single point, and Sasaki is devastated to see this destruction. Peeps tells him to not feel bad as he was the one who performed this deed, and Sasaki thanks him for cheering him up. The two of them then try to head back, but they are attacked by someone and Peeps blocks with a barrier. The attack separates Sasaki and Peeps is attacked by a strange-looking girl. While Peeps fights the girl, Sasaki uses his power to attack the girl, and Peeps attacks the girl. Sasaki uses his water magic to cushion his fall, and he notices Peeps fighting with the girl. The both of them have a heated battle where they both keep firing spells at each other. And Sasaki then meets Viscount Muller, and he notices that Muller has an injured person with him. Sasaki heals the injured man with his healing magic, and Muller introduces Sasaki as a merchant of his domain. The man wonders what a merchant is doing here, and Muller tells the man that Sasaki is not their enemy. The man then thanks Sasaki for saving his life, and he then tells the man that he is the second prince of her kingdom named Adonis. Hearing this, Sasaki bows down, and Muller mentions that he didn't know that Sasaki could use healing magic. Sasaki states that it's not a big deal, and he mentions that he is even more surprised. He states that he was told that Viscount Muller had fallen in battle, and Muller mentions that it's true that the battle became a little high-pitched, and he was separated from the rest of the army with the prince, so it's no surprise that they thought that he was dead. The prince mentions that this entire thing was his fault, and Muller states that his incompetence was why this all happened. He wonders if Sasaki can accompany them. Sasaki agrees, and they try to leave at once, but someone fires an arrow near them. They fire some more arrows, but Sasaki blocks them with a barrier, and he uses lightning magic to bring their enemies out in the open. Muller then fights the enemies up close, and he defeats them all the way to the top of the tower. The tower is now quiet easily. The prince thanks the both of them for saving him, and Muller mentions that he only did his duty as his subject. He states that he never knew that Sasaki had so many spells at his command, and Sasaki mentions that he just had a good teacher. Muller states that Sasaki's teacher must be someone incredible, and he would love to meet them sometime. The scene then cuts to the three of them in a nearby settlement, but they notice that the settlement is being attacked by orcs, and Sasaki uses his lightning magic to fight the orcs in the tower. The orcs are now in the village, and Sasaki is the only one who can save the villagers. He defeats one orc after the other, but when they come in a group, he asks Muller and the prince for help. They all take out the orcs around them, but they notice that there is no end to these orcs. Muller states that an elite orc must be leading them, and he explains that an elite orc is much stronger than a normal one, and they would need a full regiment to take it on. The elite orc then shows himself, and Sasaki uses his lightning magic on it, but it doesn't have much effect. Muller then attacks the elite orc, but even this doesn't face him, and the orc kicks Muller. It tries to attack the others after this, but the prince uses his barrier to protect everyone, and Sasaki heals Muller. Muller apologizes for this, and he mentions that next time he is going to go for its head, and this might injure the elite orc. They all prepare to fight, but Peeps drops a large boulder on the elite orc, and he apologizes to Sasaki for his late arrival. We see that the elite orc is still fine, and Peeps then creates an urn for the elite orc. The elite orc is then attacked by a earth golem to take care of the elf. Muller recognizes this type of golem, and the golem manages to defeat the elite orc with ease. Peeps then explains that elite specimens can be found in species of all plants and animals, and this includes humans as well. He mentions that both him and Sasaki would classify as elite specimens of humanity, and Sasaki hopes that this won't show up in his next physical. Peeps then apologizes for just dropping Sasaki earlier, and Sasaki mentions that it's fine, and that he is going to use the magic to land safely using magic. Muller then asks Sasaki who that bird is, and Sasaki mentions that this is his magic teacher. Peeps apologizes for his lack of greetings, and Muller mentions that he doesn't mind that, and he wonders if he can ask Peeps something. Peeps allows it, and Muller asks him if he is the Starzage. Peeps wonders what makes him think so, and Muller mentions that his spellcasting and his manner of speech are both similar to the Starzage. Peeps tells Muller that it's been a while, and Muller bows to him, and he is glad to see that the Starzage is alright. Peeps states that he is glad to see that Adonis is also well, and Adonis greets him as well. Peeps then explains that he crossed over to another world in this form, and he apologizes for keeping silent all this time. Muller mentions that he should be the one to apologize as the root of this problem is the Nobility's jockeying for status. He mentions that it's because he did nothing to help the Starzage, and Peeps asks Muller to not let this trouble him. He mentions that the Starzage is dead, and now he wishes to lead a peaceful life as this man's pet. Sasaki states that Peeps is the reason he was able to get those supplies the other day, and he has also annihilated the Ogun's forces. Muller thinks that this is incredible, and Sasaki asks Muller and Adonis to keep the matter of the Starzage revival a secret from the others. He mentions that Peeps only wants peace right now, and the two of them agree. Rich then uses his teleportation magic to take everyone back to Muller's estate, and the guards are happy to see that the lord of the house is back. Elsa then comes out and she hugs her father with teary eyes. Muller apologizes for worrying her, and Mark asks Sasaki what's going on. Sasaki mentions that he just happened to run into the two of them, and he states that it's a long story, but the good part is that they are both safe and sound. He mentions that Ogun no longer poses a threat and they can rest easy for now. He states that he was led to believe that the entire Ogun Imperial army was wiped out overnight, and Mark can't believe this. Muller's two sons then also come there, and they welcome back their father. Elsa is relieved to see them all right, and Muller tells them that they played their roles well. He apologizes for not telling this to Elsa, and Elsa's brothers then commend her for being strong through all this. He apologizes for tricking her, and Elsa cries in relief. Muller then introduces his sons Maximilian and Kaito Sasaki, and he explains that this was all part of a plan that he devised. He states that with the start of the war and an increase in feuding among the noble factions, there were those in his orbit that started acting strangely. In order to sniff out the traitors, he sent false word that he had died, and then his sons faked a succession dispute and pretended to kill each other. He mentions that he never thought that he would come so close to death. The butler can't believe that this was all an act, and Elsa was kept in the dark. Kai then states that information was leaked to the house of Count Dietrich, and he wanted to force a marriage between his second son and Elsa and effectively seize control of their lands. Muller mentions that Count Dietrich is an excellent man, but at the same time he is ruthless and he will stop at nothing to achieve his goals. The trust between them has been on the wane for some time now, and he asks his soldiers to take the butler into custody. Sasaki is surprised. He is surprised that Viscount Muller devised a strategy this masterful, and he thinks that it must be his strategizing which has kept him alive for this long. He thinks that it must be stressful to be a noble, and Elsa then thanks Sasaki for saving her father. Sasaki mentions that it was nothing, and Elsa leaves. The scene then cuts to the middle school girl named Odonari in her school, and she thinks that she hasn't seen Sasaki for a few days. She thinks that she doesn't know if his regular schedule or the way he works has changed, and that he has been away for more than 3 days in the few years she has known him. After school she heads home, and she hopes that Sasaki comes home soon. On the way she notices a woman's corpse, and she contacts the police. After a while the police come there, and they investigate the crime scene, and they let Odonari leave after asking her a few questions. She then hears a few guys talking that their division will be handling this case, and this means that they will have to let Sasaki and Hashizaki deal with this. One of them then asks the other why Sasaki is not there. The other one tells him that he is her water source. Afterwards we see Sasaki in his house, and he notices that a few days passed in this world when he was in the other world. He thinks that the time he spent in the other world should have been equivalent to 1 or 2 days here. Peeps thinks that time has passed faster than twice the rate which they predicted, and he thinks that the temporal distortion between worlds must be variable. He wonders what could be affecting it, and he thinks that they should look back at the past to find out what was different. Sasaki then remembers that first they ended the war between the Kingdom of Hers and the Ogun Empire, and then the succession dispute at Muller's estate was solved. As a reward for saving Prince Adonis, this Count Muller earned a post at the capital and the title of Count. The king also granted him the title of Royal Guard Knight, which is assigned directly to royalty, and Prince Adonis asked him to manage his personal funds. Sasaki thinks that nothing here has anything to do with time difference. He thinks that the time distortion between worlds is the same as the time distortion, and Hashizaki then comes to his house. She states that Sasaki should leave a notice if he is going out somewhere, and she asks him to come to work with her. The scene then cuts to the two of them in a car, and Hashizaki tells Sasaki that today they are going to recruit a psychic. He is a high school student who lives in Saitama Prefecture, and there have been recent reports of supernatural phenomenon around him. Hashizaki thinks that kids these days cause nothing but trouble, and Sasaki tells her that he is the same age as her. Hashizaki mentions that she is more mature mentally, and she states that according to the reports, the kid has pyrokinesis, but his output is the same as a miniature flamethrower. There haven't been any reports of fire incidents at the school, and he has been using his power exclusively within his neighborhood, away from the public eye. Sasaki thinks that this must be why they must have called for Hashizaki, as she can manipulate water, and Hashizaki mentions that he is right and she states that they should get to work. Other speaker. Sasaki also says that they are doing their best to save the school, and she says that. Speaker A. Sasaki states that she makes it sound easy, and he wonders if they shouldn't investigate a bit more thoroughly first. Hashizaki mentions that this won't be necessary, as he is only E-rank just like Sasaki, and they should be enough to handle him. Sasaki states that this might be true, but they did run into trouble the last time, and Hashizaki mentions that for the worst-case scenario they have Chief Akutsu's permission to use handguns. The scene then cuts to the two of them in the boys' school, and Sasaki explains that the bureau had already contacted the school, and their front was that they came here from the central government to observe educational situation in the area. Hashizaki then notices the student they are after, and Sasaki thinks that he looks like an ordinary student, but Hashizaki mentions that he is still a psychic, so he should not let his guard down. They follow the student and they notice some other students bullying him. Hashizaki tries to intervene, but Sasaki stops her, and he states that they should watch for now. Hashizaki mentions that the boy might use his powers, and Sasaki states that by the looks of it, this bullying has been going on for a while, but there haven't been any instances of the boy using his power in school. This indicates that the boy has been the target of bullying, so when he is by himself, they ought to get in touch with him. Although it hurts to watch, Hashizaki agrees to follow Sasaki's plan. Sasaki believes that this means that the child may decide to use his power in school today, so he wants to avoid interfering in a way that would compromise his dignity so they can continue working together. Hashizaki asks Sasaki to hand off communication and bargaining to her, mentioning that she has her own plan as well. She says he can pass the time writing a report or doing something else, and she'll get in touch with him if anything comes up. After the scene cuts to Sasaki in a cafe, he understands. He considers how, at this time of day, he used to typically grab a quick lunch from the convenience store and eat it in the park, but now he is sipping coffee under the sun with style. He thinks that they can never know what will happen in life, and he thinks that since he has some free time, he should check out the supermarkets in the area and get something good for peeps. He then notices the guy they are supposed to recruit with a girl, and he follows them. He thinks that the girl in the glasses might be his girlfriend, and he wonders where Hashizaki is. He then thinks that this girl looks a little familiar, and he realizes that right now he must look like a creep who was stalking a young couple. He tries to leave, but the bullies come to him. They say that they never knew that the boy had a girlfriend, and they ask the girl if she wants to hang out with them. The boy tries to protect her, but the bullies still ask the girl to dump this dude and come hang out with them. One of them touches her hand, but the girl slaps him and the bully tries to hit her. The boy then uses his pyrokinesis power in anger, and his fire soars so high that it manages to damage a plane flying above. The plane starts to crash and Sasaki erects a barrier. He then asks the girl if she is okay, and the girl wonders what Sasaki is doing here. Sasaki then realizes that she is Hashizaki, and Hashizaki wonders if he was following her. Sasaki states that he wasn't, and he mentions that he just happened to see the two of them. He states that he didn't expect that she was the girl the boy was with, as he never could have guessed that she could make such a convincingly cute disguise. Hashizaki mentions that she thought that this is a fucking bull was the most certain way of recruiting him, and she wonders if this barrier is his power. Sasaki states that he has no idea, and Hashizaki states that they should try to cover this up for now, and Sasaki makes some ice for her. Hashizaki creates water out of it, and she uses it to knock out the bullies and their target. She then thinks that if this barrier is the work of another psychic, then they should have revealed themselves by now, and she wonders if Sasaki is a magical girl. Sasaki can't understand what she is talking about, and Hashizaki thinks that every one of the magical girls so far have been girls. Sasaki wonders what is a magical girl, and Hashizaki explains that there are 7 magical girls in the world. They are children who have acquired strange magical powers, and they can cause inexplicable phenomenon with a different logic than physics. One of them is Japanese, and she has been going around killing psychics. She mentions that she is sure that Sasaki is the one who is going to kill the psychics. Hashizaki has a lot of questions, but he should save them for later. She states that for now they should do something about this barrier, and it would be a pain if someone took pictures and put them on the internet. They might even suffer a pay cut, and Sasaki thinks that this is a serious issue. The girl Sasaki saw earlier then attacks the barrier, and the barrier manages to block the attack. Hashizaki tells Sasaki that they need to get out of here, and the girl recognizes Sasaki. Hashizaki wonders if Sasaki is the one who is going to kill the psychics. Hashizaki knows this girl and Sasaki mentions that he saw her fishing for food scraps near his apartment. The girl asks Sasaki if he is a psychic and Sasaki states that he is not, and he realizes that she is a magical girl. The girl mentions that she saw a fireball in the sky and her beam was also blocked, and she thinks that there must be at least 2 psychics here. Sasaki wonders if she needs something with the psychics, and the girl states that she is going to kill all psychics. She won't let even a single one escape. He takes a control of the kids, and Bathio and Hashizaki ask the girl if she lives near here. The girl mentions that there is a large supermarket nearby and they throw a lot of food, so she comes here sometimes. She then asks Sasaki why he is here, and Sasaki mentions that it's the duty of an officer to come running if there is trouble, and he shows her that he is a police officer. Sasaki thinks that they need to find a way to get out of here, and he wonders if there is a way he can talk to this girl alone. The psychic girl that Sasaki met earlier then comes there, and Hashizaki asks her is the girl who he is coming for a congratulatory profession here. Hashizaki recognizes her as Shizuka Futari. Sasaki thinks that this is an odd name, and Hashizaki mentions that this is not her real name, they call her this because of the color of the kimono she wears. Hashizaki thinks that this is not good, and Shizuka mentions that she could help them if they are having trouble. The magical girl then asks Shizuka if she is psychic, and Shizuka mentions that she might be, and the magical girl attacks her. Shizuka manages to dodge, and she notices Sasaki's barrier. Hashizaki then tries to attack Shizuka using some water blasts, but Shizuka dodges. Even still, some of them manage to get her. Shizuka heals her injury and Hashizaki attacks her again, but she manages to dodge and she knocks Hashizaki unconscious. She mentions that Sasaki won't be in trouble now, and Sasaki asks her why she is doing this. Shizuka states that she has a favor to ask of him, and the magical girl asks Sasaki if he knows this psychic. Sasaki agrees to work together with Shizuka for now, and he mentions that he will be the decoy and support her, and he asks her to find an opening to attack. He asks her to refrain from killing the girl, and Shizuka understands. Sasaki then fights the magical girl and he keeps her busy. While fighting, the magical girl thinks that Sasaki is a psychic, but Sasaki states that he is not. He mentions that he just used magic, and he states that he is a magical middle-aged man. The girl wonders if the fairies asked for his help as well, and Shizuka tries to attack her from behind, but the girl manages to take her out. Sasaki then asks the girl where are the fairies that asked for her help, and the girl mentions that she killed them. She states that this scarf is made from their fur, and Sasaki wonders why she would do that. The girl mentions that she did not want to be a magical girl, so she killed them, and Sasaki states that he just noticed that the girl can use magic without any incantations. The girl doesn't understand, so Sasaki explains that he needs to chant incantations in order to use magic. He then asks the girl to fix his hand to see if she can stop the girl. After realizing that Sasaki is a magical middle-aged man, the girl questions why he is with a psychic. According to Sasaki, they happen to cross paths accidentally, and the girl is wondering if she can kill her. When Sasaki presses her to explain why she hates psychics so much, the girl says that psychics murdered her family and her closest friends. She leaves using some kind of portal. The scene then cuts to Sasaki, Shizuka, and the others in a hotel, and Sasaki thanks Shizuka for helping him out earlier. He asks her what favor she wanted to ask of him, and she mentions that she would like to switch jobs to his place. She asks him to recruit her, and Sasaki mentions that he has no authority to make that decision. Shizuka asks him to contact his superior in this case, and Sasaki wonders why she wants to switch her workplace. Shizuka states that she is interested in him, and Sasaki mentions that he is just an average middle-aged man. Shizuka tells him that he can create icicles and release electricity, and he also managed to block the magical girl's beam. She states that he must also be hiding this power from the bureau, and Sasaki thinks that she saw right through him. He tries to feign ignorance, and Shizuka mentions that she could keep all this between them if Sasaki introduces her to his senior. Akuta Fate Akutsu then calls Sasaki, and he asks him what he is doing right now. Sasaki explains that they had an encounter with a magical girl on site, and Akutsu wonders if this is why the cargo plane from Iruma base crashed. Sasaki tells him that it was hit by an attack from the magical girl, and they managed to flee because of the whims of the magical girl. Akutsu mentions that a fireball was seen at the same time as the plane crash, and Sasaki tells him that the boy was just using his power to defend himself. Akutsu understands that the fireball was seen at the same time as the fireball, and he mentions that this works in their favor. Sasaki then tells him that he just received an employment offer from Shizuka Futari, and afterwards he tells Shizuka that the chief has agreed to set up an interview for her. Hashizaki then wakes up, but Sasaki doesn't notice this. And he tells Shizuka that the chief might install cameras in her home if she gets accepted, and she must find the right time to dispose of them. He states that it's against the rules for him to tell her this, but he thought that he should inform her while he has the chance, as they might suspect her being a spy. Hashizaki then asks Sasaki if the section chief really installs cameras at the homes of all of his employees, and Sasaki mentions that he did say that they did that to every recruit. He mentions that the chief doesn't put them there for shameful reasons, and Hashizaki states that they should go back to the bureau now as they already retrieved the target. Sasaki then notices that there is a store on the first floor of the hotel, and he states that he would like to stop by there first. The scene cuts to him looking at some jam, and he says that he's not going to, and Shizuka asks him if he likes jam. Sasaki states that he doesn't, but he heard that they can make meat more tender by using umeboshi. Since he doesn't like sour stuff, he wanted to use this instead, and Shizuka mentions that he is yet to understand the essence of Japanese plums. The scene then cuts to him outside his office, and Hashizaki mentions that Sasaki seems to have gotten close to Shizuka as she did give him a gift. Sasaki mentions that she said that this is true umeboshi and she spent many years making it. Hashizaki asks him if he is aware of how dangerous she is, and she states that she is an A-rank psychic. Her ability, Energy Drain, can suck the life energy out of anyone she touches, and she also has fearsome regenerative ability, and despite how she looks, she is over a century old. Afterwards, the two of them meet Akutsu, and he mentions that it took them too long to get here. He states that he has taken the boy to the department in charge, and Hashizaki then mentions that she just heard the news that a police chief puts cameras in the homes of his employees. Akutsu admits it, and Hashizaki states that this is sexual harassment. Akutsu mentions that she can rest assured as he doesn't share this with anybody and he is homosexual. Sasaki mentions that putting it this way can cause confusion, as he was the one who told her this, and Akutsu mentions that Sasaki is not his type and he is not foolish enough to pursue that kind of relationship in his workplace. He states that they have rooted a significant number of spies with those who are working for him and his employees. Sasaki mentions that it's umeboshi, and he wonders if Akutsu likes them. Akutsu states that he does, but he is quite particular about them. Sasaki then asks him to try one, and Akutsu does, and he makes a peaceful expression. He mentions that this is one of the finest umeboshi he has ever had, and Hashizaki can't believe this. Akutsu asks her to try this for herself, and she hesitantly does, but it's too sour for her. Akutsu then tries to tell Sasaki not to be an angel of the interview, but Hashizaki wonders what he is talking about. Akutsu tells her that Shizuka asked Sasaki to arrange an interview for her, and Hashizaki is not happy to hear this. The scene then cuts to Sasaki returning to his apartment, and he meets Shizuka on the way. She asks him to let her stay at his place tonight, and Sasaki asks her why. Shizuka then shows him a bug in a thermal camera, and she mentions that using these she saw a talking bird in Sasaki's room. Sasaki thinks that his apartment is broken and won't work, but Sasaki says that if it doesn't work, that's because he is afraid of her. She probably has a camera hidden in his room, and Shizuka mentions that the bird was talking to itself and it was facing the computer. This piqued her interest, and she states that she has heard that the messengers of the fairy world visit theirs by possessing the flesh of beasts. Sasaki tries to feign ignorance, but Shizuka mentions that she can just give this memory card to his superior in this case. She then mentions that she was just kidding, and she states that Sasaki is not guarding himself well. She mentions that psychics in this country do not think fondly of magical girls, and he might feel safe as a bureau employee, but he should watch out his surroundings more. Sasaki thinks that she must have taken his spiel about being a magical middle-aged man seriously, and he asks her what she wants from him. Shizuka tells him that she is being targeted by her former organization, and Sasaki realizes that she is in search of an ally. He mentions that he understands her circumstances, but accepting her would expose him to the unnecessary risk. Then Shizuka says that she has accumulated a good deal of wealth over her life, and they can use this to work out a deal. Sasaki finds this to be an enticing offer because he has been tight on this side because he has been stockpiling goods. He says he would be willing to accept depending on the amount, but he is unable to decide for himself. He asks her for some time to discuss things, and he thinks that he wants to get his story straight with Peeps before letting Shizuka into his house, and he also needs to check for any hidden cameras. The scene then cuts to Peeps meeting Shizuka the next day, and he introduces himself. He asks her how much she would be willing to offer, and Sasaki explains that Peeps and him discussed everything last night, and ultimately what convinced him was the prospect of being able to meet Shadow Bryant on a weekly basis. Peeps then asks Shizuka if she can pay with something other than money, and he mentions that the fact that she has amassed a fortune must mean that she has connections using which she can buy and sell things of great value. He states that they are lacking such connections and he asks her to share some of her connections instead of money. Shizuka mentions that she wouldn't mind that, and Sasaki states that this is fine with him as well, but he would like to avoid any problems with his workplace. Shizuka understands and she states that this must mean that they have something from the fairy world that they would like to sell. Peeps mentions that this is correct and he states that they would like to sell valuable metals for now. Sasaki thinks that before the problem was converting the valuables from the finans to Japanese yen, but they can fix this by going through Shizuka's contacts. Shizuka mentions that this does pique her interest, but she can't decide before seeing the goods in question. Peeps states that they will prepare the goods in the near future and Sasaki tells her that it's time for her interview. Shizuka then talks to Akatsu on a video call and Akatsu asks her if she really plans on transferring into the bureau. Shizuka states that she does. And Akatsu asks her if she can convince him as she was once part of an organization hostile to them. Shizuka states that his concerns are reasonable and Akatsu mentions that she is a skilled psychic. Shizuka asks him to consider her offer positively in this case and Akatsu mentions that it won't be possible for him to accept her as an official bureau employee right now and Shizuka mentions that she would be grateful if he just allowed her to help with their work. Akatsu agrees and Shizuka asks him what will become of her status. She mentions that she is fine with part-time or contract work as long as she can operate under the bureau's name, but it would be a problem if it doesn't appear so to the others. Akatsu then mentions that Sasaki will be looking after her in this regard and Sasaki is surprised to hear this. He tells Akatsu that he is still a new recruit himself and Akatsu mentions that it's his policy to promote excellent employees regardless of how long they have been employed. Sasaki then mentions that he doesn't have much authority and Akatsu gives him the same level of authority as Hashizaki. He leaves Shizuka in his hands and the scene then cuts to the two of them celebrating Shizuka's acceptance into the bureau. They have some drinks and Shizuka asks him if he liked the amebashi she gave him. Sasaki mentions that he hasn't eaten it yet but he did share it with everyone. Shizuka states that they must have liked it and Sasaki tells her that it did allow him to see a rare face. He thanks her for the amebashi and Shizuka mentions that she can understand why his boss trusts him so much. She states that he is an honest and cute fella and Sasaki finds it hard to believe. He states that the chief just believes in meritocracy and Shizuka's presence must strike something in him. Shizuka mentions that this means that their fates are connected and Sasaki states that Shizuka might just be a contract employee but she was still hired and she should do her best to appeal her transfer to her former organization. Shizuka mentions that she would much rather be in an intimate relationship and spread some spicy rumors in the bureau and Sasaki thinks that intimate relationship aside, he does need her help to sell valuables from another world. Hashizaki then comes there and she mentions that she heard that Sasaki was put in charge of Shizuka. She asks him what he is doing and Sasaki mentions that the chief ordered them to do this. Hashizaki states that he was just joking and Sasaki asks her if she would like to join them if she hasn't had lunch and Hashizaki joins them and afterwards she catches Sasaki while he is returning from the lavatory. She mentions that she wants to talk to him and Sasaki states that he also has something to say to her. He asks her if she can use her hydrokinesis to manipulate the liquid inside the human body and Hashizaki mentions that she can do it if the liquid is flowing outside but she can't control it when it's underneath the skin. Sasaki thinks that it would have been an effective deterrent against Shizuka if it were possible and Hashizaki then thanks Sasaki for saving her yesterday. She mentions that she can still continue to work because she is still working. Sasaki says that she can't do it because he handled the situation nicely and she gives him some homemade fried eggs as thank you. She mentions that Sasaki said that he liked amebashi but he couldn't handle sour things so she wrapped the plums with eggs so he can still enjoy their flavor. Sasaki thanks her for this and Hashizaki asks him to try this when he gets back home. Sasaki then eats the fried eggs in the restaurant and he thinks that it's really good. Hashizaki is glad to hear this but she doesn't like it when Shizuka eats the eggs as well. Shizuka then asks her if she is jealous seeing how close she is to Sasaki but Hashizaki embarrassingly denies this. The scene then cuts to Sasaki and Peeps watching some Japanese drama and we see that Peeps is really interested in it. Afterwards in the Who we see the king addressing the nobles. He states that right now their kingdom is facing unprecedented peril and the Oban's empire's loss on the battlefield was simply the result of a battle between two great war criminals. In the near future the two nations are bound to clash over money and power so Sasaki has led the society head-to-head. Again, and for the development of their nation and to regain their past prosperity, he will declare a new measure. He then declares that all who has the right to inherit the throne can now play a part in the politics of the nation. After 5 years he will cede the throne to the one who brings the most remarkable results, and everyone is surprised to hear this. The scene then cuts to Mark walking around town with one of his friends, and his friend states that he heard how Mark gained early information of the war ending and made a huge profit with it. Mark is just lucky, and a carriage then almost hits Mark, but his friend saves him. The driver then accuses Mark of hitting Count Dietrich's carriage, and Mark tries to tell him that he didn't do anything, and his friend notices that inside the carriage is manager Herman of their trading company. The scene then cuts to Sasaki checking if he has all the goods that he is going to trade today. He then notices Peeps staring outside the window, and he asks him what's up, but Peeps states that it's nothing. As he is about to leave, a maid informs Sasaki that he has a lot of money and that he will give it to Mark. He then says that he will give it to Mark, and he says that he has received a letter from Count Muller. Afterwards we see Sasaki outside of Muller's residence, and he notices that the guard is being really formal with him. He thinks that last time he was more casual, and he meets Count Muller. He asks him why he has summoned him here, and Muller mentions that the king recently implemented several measures that has set unprecedented events into motion within the nation. The events concern the privileged classes, specifically the royalty and the nobility. He needs to inform Sasaki that he will be happy to listen, as they have also been hoping to learn about the current state of affairs. Muller then mentions that following the clash with the Ogun Empire, the king has permitted all legitimate heirs to be involved in the politics of the nation, and he will unconditionally cede the throne to the one who makes the biggest contribution. Sasaki is surprised to hear this, and Peeps states that the royal family is doomed to fall the moment their nation is defeated and occupied by another, but this is a rather sudden change. He wonders if something has happened to the current king, and Muller mentions that this is all he knows. Peeps then asks him who is primarily competing right now, and Muller mentions that majority of the nobles have sided with either the first Prince Luis or the second Prince Adonis. Peeps thinks that conflict is inevitable at this rate, but he is sure that the development must have taken them by surprise. Muller states that it has. And because of that, the conflict between nobles has gotten fiercer. Some have already died as the result, and this is why he would like for Sasaki to leave the country as soon as possible and head for the Republic of Lunge. He states that he is sure that the prince will be mad at him for saying this, but there is no need for Sasaki to be concerned with this. He mentions that he has several connections with the people in the Republic of Lunge, and he can have them arrange for his travel. Sasaki thinks that none of his bosses have said something like that to him, and this hits him in the feels despite his age. He tells Muller that he understands where he is from, but he would still like to continue business in this town. He wonders if Muller would take a look through the products they have brought this time, and Muller tries to argue, but Peeps stops him. Muller then tells Sasaki that he appreciates his thoughtfulness, and one of his butlers then inform him that a messenger from Herman Trading Company has arrived, and he has an urgent message for them. We see that Elsa is spying on them, and the messenger informs them that Mark has been arrested for the crime of disrespecting a noble. Muller asks the prince to leave the country, and he says that he has no intention of leaving the country. Muller tells the messenger about the whole story, and the messenger states that he was apprehended because he hit Count Dietrich's carriage. He mentions that he was with him when this happened, and the vice manager did not offend anyone, he was framed. Sasaki then sums up the messenger's explanation, and he tells us that the one behind Mark's arrest is none other than his own manager. It all started right after the war, and since Mark obtained earlier news of the end of the war, he managed to make a handsome profit using his skills. At the same time as the manager Herman was doing business in the capital Alestos, and to move their main functions to the capital, he made a deal with Count Dietrich to set up a new storefront. However, after learning about Mark's achievement, he couldn't help but be worried, and he thought that at this rate his position might be in danger. Count Dietrich saw this as an opportunity to do something to Muller, and he teamed up with the manager and made a plan to take down Mark. Sasaki remembers that Dietrich is the person for whom Sebastian was working, and he tells Muller. Muller mentions that this will put his mind at ease, and he states that he will go and meet the noble in question. He gives Sasaki a dagger, and he states that if he shows this dagger to someone and give them his name, then Sasaki's words will be regarded as his own. The scene then cuts to Sasaki in a carriage to the prison, and he thinks that to sum things up, Count Dietrich of the first prince's faction is attacking Count Muller of the second prince's faction by making use of the manager who was jealous of Mark. He wonders how he can solve this, and says that he will assist Sasaki with his magic if the situation demands it. Sasaki tells Peeps that he would like to handle this himself, and instead of using force, he wants to rely on politics. The scene then cuts to him in prison and he gains entry by showing the knife that Muller gave him to the guard. The guard tells him to be careful as a knight serving Count Dietrich is keeping watch of this area, and the knight then guides Sasaki to Mark. Mark is glad to see him and Sasaki apologizes for taking too long. He then heals Mark and Mark thanks him. Sasaki states that he heard what happened from his company, and he mentions that Count Muller is preparing for this incident. He will prove his innocence, but the knight doubts it. Sasaki then asks the knight to give a message to Count Dietrich, and he asks him to tell the Count that it appears that he is teaming up with the manager of Hermann Trading Company, but when it comes to business talent no one can rival Mark. He states that he would humbly advise him to look into how much profit Mark made after the recent incident with the Ogun Empire, and the knight thinks that Sasaki is speaking nonsense. Sasaki mentions that this would be for the Count to decide, and the knight states that he will tell him that, but he wonders if it's all right for him to be fawning over those supporting the first prince, as he did become a noble because of the second prince. He wonders what will happen if the others find out, and Sasaki mentions that Mark is more important to him than the second prince. And Mark is surprised to hear this. The knight can't believe that he would disrespect the one who he is supposed to serve, and Sasaki says that Mark is more important to him than the second prince. Sasaki states that he doesn't care, and the knight can tell the second prince about this if he wants. He mentions that the knight can take this however he wants, but he promises that he wouldn't make Count Dietrich regret this. The scene then cuts to Sasaki meeting Joseph. And he tells him that he was thinking of opening a trading company in this city. He came here to discuss whether Kepler would be willing to invest and provide support. And Joseph wonders why they would accept such a deal. Sasaki states that he will have to, and Joseph asks him to show the business talent to Mark. Joseph then shows him the products that he will be selling in his company. And he would like to limit his wholesale to a single client and develop something like brand awareness. Joseph understands what Sasaki is saying, but he is from the kingdom of hers. And since this would be a deal between trading companies, it poses a big risk for them. Sasaki mentions that he has a proposal for them in this case, and he states that the next time he comes here, he will sell several of his products to the Kepler Trading Company, and they will be part of the payment as collateral. Joseph agrees to this deal after hearing this. And Sasaki tells him that he would like to call this new company the Mark Trading Company. The scene then cuts to Sasaki in the market, and he thinks that it would be great if they can find something to trade for in his world. Peeps mentions that he has something to discuss with Sasaki regarding this, and they have a chat over some hot dogs. Peeps states that he was thinking of starting the trade with gold, and he explains that according to the internet, the gold is way less compared to here. Synthesizing gold is still not feasible, and Sasaki thinks that for now gold is an extremely reliable investment. He mentions that they can use gold coins for this, and Peeps states that they will have to melt the coins into ingots to avoid being tracked, and they will also need to increase the purity, because the gold in their world is purer than this one. Hearing this, Sasaki thinks that Peeps sure is a quick learner, and he states that they should head to Count Muller's town for now. He mentions that he will leave melting gold to Peeps, and he will secure some wooden boxes for transport. The scene then cuts to Elsa telling French about Mark, and French states that they should save Mark right away. Elsa mentions that her father is headed to negotiate with them, but he is up against someone who has the same rank as him, so he can't take Mark back without permission. Afterwards we see that Sasaki is finished with the boxes, and he wonders how long Peeps is going to take. The maid then informs him that someone has come to visit him, and he notices that it's Elsa. Elsa asks him if it's true that Mark has been imprisoned, and he states that it's true. He mentions that both Count Muller and him are preparing for his rescue. And Elsa wonders if he will be able to return safely. Sasaki mentions that he will make sure of this, and he states that Elsa is really kind. She wonders if he is making fun of her. But he states that he is serious, and he tells her that there is nothing for her to worry about. Peeps then comes there, and he apologizes to Sasaki for the delay. And Elsa is surprised to see him talk. Peeps then notices her, and he starts chirping, but he can't fool her no matter how much he chirps now. Afterwards the bird introduces himself to Elsa as Peeps, and Sasaki tells her that his familiar is a unique kind, and he can speak human language and use high-level magic, but his rareness makes him a prime target for others. So he would like for Elsa to keep this a secret. He mentions that only Count Muller knows of this, and they will have to leave town if the general public finds out about this. The scene cuts to Sasaki and Shizuka at a warehouse after he returns to his world with the cargo after speaking with the French After saying that he would meet French, the scene cuts to Sasaki and Shizuka at a warehouse. When she inquires as to whether these are the mementos from the fantasy world, Sasaki replies that they are simply extra items he had lying around. When Shizuka opens the cargo, everyone is shocked to see Elsa inside the box. I appreciate you watching episodes 1 through 7. The remaining segments can be found on my channel. If you enjoyed the video, please hit the like and share buttons. You can also turn on the notification bell to receive updates on new anime recaps. Only on Anime Plus channel.